all foreign policy at this time actually is domestic policy. People's energy bills is domestic policy. Dealing with the climate emergency is domestic policy. Migration flows is domestic policy. All of it needs engagement with the global community.
A deal on Northern Ireland looks to be on the cards. The Prime Minister is in Belfast speaking to DUP members. Meanwhile, Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy is in Munich setting out foreign policy and a vision indeed from the Labour Party. And he joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, then, some encouragement on the Northern Ireland Protocol this morning. This looks like the big sell from Rishi Sunak, and this deal is nearing the finish line and could indeed be set out in the Commons on Tuesday. Will the Prime Minister's deal have your support and the support of the Labour Party?
We've said for weeks that we hope the Prime Minister is able to get a deal. We always said that a deal could be delivered through negotiation, and that if he needs Labour's support to get the deal through, whatever mechanism he requires in the House of Commons, we will support it because we believe a deal is in the national interest of the people of Northern Ireland. I visited Northern Ireland a few weeks ago. It's clear that businesses want certainty. So yes, Rishi Sunak has Labour's support to get the deal through, if that is in fact the stage that we've now got to.
Great. Okay. Well, that sounds like a slightly disconcerting outbreak of consensus then that we could see in the next few days on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Well, look, it's clear that the pressure on Rishi Sunak has actually always been from a significant part of his own backbench, the ERG, that have raised issues around the European Court of Justice particularly. It will be interesting to see how Rishi Sunak overcomes those issues. But what we have said is that he does have Labour's support to get the changes through, whatever mechanism he requires. We don't yet know whether he will tear up his bill, whether there'll be more motions before the House of Commons, but we will assist him in the coming days.
Encouraging news. Let's go on to discuss the latest announcements around strike action as well. Quite a lot of announcements actually yesterday, it has to be said, Mr. Lammy. First of all, on the RMT, the offer to the RMT for Network Rail and Rail Delivery Group was 9% over 2 years. Subject to working practice changes, but the RMT rejected it. Were they right to reject a 9% pay offer?
Look, I'm not proximate to those negotiations.
Well, but what do you think of them, though?
If it's 9% over 2 years, then effectively it's 4.5% each year. And you and I both know that inflation is running at just under 10%. All of us have to pay our bills. All of us are meeting the inflation crisis, cost of living crisis, energy bills, and I recognise the pressure that all public sector workers are under. In the end, this requires careful negotiation. It requires a government that's willing, that's able to get around the table. I'm not privy to those negotiations, but I am aware that the government has been reluctant to roll up its sleeves and negotiate.
It sounds like, though, from what you're saying then, that the rejection of 9% is valid in the face of inflation that is running at more than that. Is that fair to say?
Well, I'm here in Munich.
I know, but we'll get to that. We will get to that.
I'm not around the negotiating table.
No, but you don't need to be, because we know the detail of what they've rejected.
The RMT, all of us don't want to see strikes. All of us, of course, have had meetings and business and trips delayed as a consequence of strikes. None of us want to see it. I'd love to see the strikes come to an end. It can only be achieved through negotiation.
MPs are getting a rise of 2.9%. So are the RMT's members just being greedy by rejecting 9%?
Well, you'd have to put that to the head of the pay review body that effectively determines MPs' pay.
But I'm saying you're satisfied with less than 3%, and you seem to be suggesting that rejecting 9% from rail workers is the sensible thing to do in the face of inflation of just over 10%.
Well, I'd like to see this dispute come to an end, but I also...
So should they have accepted 9%?
I also reckon, well, I've said to you that it's 4.5% a year and inflation is running at 10%.
Okay.
We all know that. So, of course, there will be train drivers who are actually on substantially less than members of parliament, of course, who are still feeling the pressure. But in the end, this can only be achieved through negotiation.
Understood. Right, let's talk about your trip to the Munich Security Conference then. In the information that Labour have given us, Mr. Lammy, about your visit there, this is about promoting Labour's foreign policy vision for a Britain reconnected. How disconnected are we? I want to understand that, first of all.
Well, at the moment, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol bill and the government's determination to tear up the treaty that it signed with the European Union just a few years ago, our relationships with Europe are bad. There's no structured dialogue. We're not able to move forward on issues like student mobility, like science, with our European colleagues, and also because of the undermining of the Good Friday Agreement by that bill, our relationship with Washington is poor. We need to get back into the world and reconnect with the global community. You'll recognize that because we've cut aid from 0.7% to 0.5%, and then are spending the lion's share of that aid here in the UK, that has also not helped us across the globe. So for all of those reasons, I'm setting out our vision, which is reconnecting us with the international community for security and prosperity at home. All foreign policy at this time actually is domestic policy. People's energy bills is domestic policy. Dealing with the climate emergency is domestic policy. Migration flows is domestic policy. All of it needs engagement with the global community.
Okay, so to take some of those in turn then, so we already discussed the Brexit deal, so that might tick off the reconnection to that end with the Northern Ireland Protocol. You mentioned foreign aid spending, so does that come with a commitment then for an increase in foreign aid spending from the Labour Party?
We have said that when the fiscal environment allows, we want to get back to 0.7.
So what benchmark are you looking for on the fiscal environment then?
Well, look, we're 2 years away from a general election. It wouldn't be right for me or indeed Rachel Reeves to set out the circumstances just yet. We had 4 budgets last year, but what we have said, we argued for 0.7. We got there. We were disappointed that the government stepped away from that 0.7 commitment. It's always the case that Labour in office revives aid and reconnects us with the international community. We want to do that once again.
Interesting. And what is the key then to reconnecting with Washington? That's something else you've mentioned, Washington, D.C. What sort of a relationship can you see Keir Starmer and Joe Biden, or indeed whoever replaces Joe Biden, whoever becomes president next? What sort of relationship is that going to be?
Well, if we can get past the Northern Ireland Protocol bill, we do have a special relationship. It's centered on security and intelligence capability. We have an important trading relationship, of course, with the United States, but on a whole host of issues in a dangerous world where we're hugely concerned about the rise of China, we want to be working with our US colleagues. At the moment, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act would cause tremendous pressure to green energy, renewable companies here in the UK. We want to work with the United States. We're able to do that if they're upset effectively with this Northern Ireland Protocol bill.
Really interesting. One other thing I just want to mention to you and ask you about, if I may, which is a Labour Party policy coming from your colleague Steve Reid, Shadow Justice Secretary. This is on fly tipping in England and Wales. Fly tippers in England and Wales could be forced to remove litter as part of clean-up squads under Labour plans. And here's the quote from Mr Reid. "If you make the mess, you'll clear up the mess. And it actually has a very beneficial effect on the entire community." Can you help us understand how you're going to round up fly tippers who notoriously go undetected, undiscovered, and are anonymous?
Well, actually, there have in the past been very successful Labour local authorities who have been able to enforce against fly tippers, been able to catch them, been able to work with them. What we're saying is if you're dumping TVs, mattresses on the roadside, when we catch you, you will be part of the group of people that go out and actually clean up the mess that you've created, it does mean supporting local authorities. It means better enforcement. And at the moment, the community orders that courts are giving, they're barely giving them out because they don't actually believe that anything is going to happen. I think Steve Reed's right to focus on this issue. When you knock on people's doors right across the country, they do raise fly tipping, they do raise antisocial behaviour, and they know that the system's not properly working.
I suppose I'm just intrigued because what happens to the mess in the months between the mess showing up and you finding out who left it there?
Well, in most parts of the country, what happens is that people ring up the local authority and they send a team round to pick up the rubbish. The question is, how can you support the local authority to give better fines? How can you support them to actually catch people, round people up, and enforce against that action where neighbours, of course, are able to supply them with the names of the individuals that they've seen?
Okay, so I mean, there could be quite a delay, I suppose, is the point I'm making.
A delay. Look, I don't think where this was working well, and I recall Robin Wales, when he was leader of Newham, doing a very good job on enforcing against fly tipping. Where this is working well, there doesn't need to be a delay on prosecution.
Understood. Mr. Lammy, thank you for your time and thanks for covering such a helpful range of issues with us as well. It's good to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy.